What's up, everybody? CHM Carnivorous here. I hope you're having a wonderful day and a wonderful week. Now, in today's video, I want to talk about the secrets, or what I have done, my secrets to growing big, beautiful, healthy truncatas. They are some of the most favorite and iconic of all carnivorous plants, especially Nepenthes. I think that they are way underrated, and I think there's a lot of misnomers about them, and they don't get talked about in the same arena with some of the beginner plants, which I believe is a wrongdoing, as I feel that they are great for all growers, no matter where you are in your carnivorous plant journey. And so today I'm going to talk about what I do to grow them. We're going to look at them, and we're going to just show you just how easy, how fun, and how amazing these plants are. Now, all that and more coming your way in just a second. Before we get into today's video, if you are new to the carnivorous plant world, be sure to check out chmcarnivores.com. There we have specifically focused our plants and our products for new growers just getting into the hobby, where you can get at a great price amazing carnivorous plants that are going to get delivered to you fast, and the plants are going to come in beautifully. And we're also offering a lot of products like different soil types that you can use, and maxi and different sort of fertilizers you can use to grow your plants. So without further ado, let's get into the video. What I have in front of me here are a couple of truncatas, and that is what this video is all about today. Now, not all truncatas are created equal. Just like any other plant, especially Nepenthes, some are easier to grow than others, and so I will be going through that and talking about which ones seem to be more forgiving and which ones are a little bit more tricky to grow. But first and foremost, let's talk about how I have them growing, or rather what media they're growing in. And truncatas tend to be epiphytic in nature. They like in the wild, they grow up in the trees, and so they like a very, very coarse, loose soil base. And so what I use is about a 60-40 perlite to peat mix, and you can see just how much perlite is in there. And I do that to allow a lot of aeration to the roots. Now, truncata have a very diminutive roots for the size of the plant, and so these are actually probably overpotted for their size, even as big as they are. But I like to give them a lot of media, and I'll explain what pots I'm growing them in just a minute. So with the 60-40 peat perlite and the large amount of media, that tends to allow them to stay aerated on their roots, and it also keeps the media from growing too compact, which again would not allow them to breathe. Now, when we're talking about what pots to grow them in, I have actually found that these net pots work the best. And here is a good pro tip, if you will, is you can get these plants, or these pots rather, on Amazon or a store for for a lot of money, honestly. Or what these are net pots. They're called pond pots, and so I get these at Lowe's. And so same exact concept there. They're net pots. They allow for a larger plant to be put in there, and they allow for extra breathing room. So it's up to you, but I would recommend these very highly. I've grown all of my truncatas, my large truncatas, in this, and they have done exceedingly well. I don't normally put them in something like this until they have gotten larger, but see, as you can see here, I grow them in just a larger pot with a lot of holes on them. But once they get pretty good size, I will put them in these net pots just to sort of mimic that natural aeration process they have in the wild. Now let's talk about watering. Now, as you can see here in the very foreground, that looks terrible, right? And so what this is called edema, and this happens when you top water or have too much water on the leaves. So I used to do a lot of ambient humidity with a humidifier, and that would keep the leaves very wet. And because of that, the truncata did not react well at all. These are very, very thick-leaved plants. They're very, just like I said about epiphytes, they're very much like a succulent leaf. And because they have thicker leaves, they can hold a lot of water for longer, and they are also more susceptible to edema. And edema essentially is where those cells get too much water, they rupture, and then they cause this unsightly blistering on the leaves. Now, one thing I do want to point out is you see these little nodes. That is not edema. This is what edema is going to look like. It's going to blister up and then turn brown. These are actually the nectar glands, and if you look here, you'll see there, this is a perfectly natural display for your truncatas. Especially when they get larger, they will start displaying that quite a bit. So when I do water them, I like to top water them, but I like to do so where I keep the moisture off of the leaves and put it simply on the media, and I do that through a sprayer with a wand on it, and that helps out substantially. As you can see, here's some of the newer leaves where I have been top watering with the media, and they are looking absolutely beautiful. It's not going to stop them entirely from getting a little bit of those corners burnt. That could be a little bit of light, which I'll get to in a minute, but they respond very well to that top watering on the media. Now, when it comes to the media moisture, truncatas are a lot more forgiving than most of your Nepenthes. Because they have this thicker leaves, they do hold a lot of water, and they can take a drier condition. I've actually found that they often prefer a drier condition. Now, to be clear, when I say a drier condition, I do not mean dry. That is very, very important. If you let it dry out, you'll get things like this picture here that is malformed because it got too dry. And that is the least of your worries. So if that happens, you still escaped. If you let it get too dry, it will die on you. So you want to make sure that the media is still moist. And the way I do that is it's almost like a sponge, the sort of moisture. So there's no sopping water coming out of this media, but it is still wet to the touch, and it has a spongy consistency. And so that is key. It's not sopping wet, there's not water coming out of it, but it's also not bone dry. It has got a very much a spongy consistency to it. When it comes to Nepenthes, however, it is far more forgiving of those little tiny dry out periods. Now let's talk about light and what these things require. What I have found with my truncata is they do very well in that middle range light. So I had them close up to the light for the longest time, and they were not happy. When I say close to the light, I've got 60 watt. I'm not sure what the PFP is on there, PPF is on the PPFD. Wow, on these lights. So I'll have to check that out. But I did have them about 2 to 3 feet away, and they were not happy. Since I've moved them back to about 4 to 5 feet away on a 60 watt light, they have responded very, very well. And again, there is kelvins and lumens, but really PPFD is what you're going to want to look at when it comes to that. But because they do grow in the understories of trees, and they are a little bit more enjoying of ambient, sort of dappled light. Certainly they don't want shade, so you don't want to go that route, but they don't need that bright light, something like oh gosh, let's see what else I can find here to give. So some of these other ones here, like this Peltata SP1 enjoys a lot of light, and so you have to just sort of understand how the plant grows in nature to understand what it needs. Because it likes that understory, I have it in a lower light, so it's about 4 to 5 feet away from the light, and it does just fine. Now, what are some of the signs that it's getting too much light? As you can see, this leaf here has got a little bit of the burning on the side. That's perfectly fine. It looks a little unsightly, but it's perfectly fine. Some of them are going to be more susceptible to others. I find that these hybrids have done very well. Something like my Truncata Hiroshima clone down there is very grumpy, and it does not react well at all to bright light. Now that I've moved it down, it is doing far better, and we'll get to those in just a minute. But it has done very well with that sort of dappled shade. I'd say probably if you're outside in a greenhouse, I'd do 60% shade cloth, and it will do just fine. Let's talk now about what temperature I grow them in, and go from there. So when it comes to temperatures, my grow tent / greenhouse, whatever you want to call it, stays within the, I'd say the low end 60 degrees, the high end up to 95 or higher. Now, a lot of truncatas like to be in lowland intermediate conditions. However, I will say that they do get a bad rep for being extreme lowland plants. I've actually found them to be quite tolerant of intermediate conditions. And then of course there are some like the Patians that do well in highland conditions, but overall I have found them to do very, very well for me. This tent can get well below 60 degrees and has been over 95 degrees, and they do just fine. Obviously if you're in sort of some sort of sustained temperature when then that range is staying below the 60s for long periods of time, or above the high temperatures isn't too much, but if it's getting over 100 for a while, you might want to watch it and bring it inside. If you are dealing with higher temperatures, you do want to make sure that you have them a little bit more on the wetter side, but not sopping wet by any means, just to keep them a little bit cool. But make no mistake, they do enjoy the warm temperatures too, being tropical. But they do very well in intermediate conditions. And I feel like that's where a lot of people are afraid to grow them, because they hear that they're lowland plants, and a lot of people feel like they can't give them that condition. But I find that they do very well, again, in intermediate. Now, let's talk about what is good for pitcher production. Here we have a pitcher that is on its way out. This is this is the JB by Truncata Patian. For good pitcher production, you're gonna want to have a good amount of moisture. I would say, humidity rather. I would say the humidity needs to be, 50-60%. However, and this is very important to note, these plants can be trained to be in lower humidity, and they can be indoor houseplants. They may not produce as big of pitchers for you, but they certainly will produce very nice pitchers. You just need to acclimate them down to that. I have them growing in temperature or humidity ranges rather, anywhere from 50 to about 70, depending on after I just watered them, and they do just fine. Again, if you let it get too dry, you'll start noticing issues like with this pitcher where the malformation of the lid and it opened prematurely. But again, these are one of the few plants in this Nepenthes that will do very well in home environments. You just have to acclimate them down, and then if you do grow them in your home, just understand that it is going to take them a while before they start producing those big iconic pitchers. Now, one thing that'll also help, just like any other plant, Truncata is no different. They like to be fed. I feed them. I actually have them on a very low feeding schedule because I don't want them growing exponentially as I'm running out of room. But I would say you could feed them once every couple of months, and I just put an Osmocote pellet in one of the pitchers. I've done so here, and that's why you see this one reacting like it is and starting to go out. Normally they'll start to rot from down here. This one has decided to go this route. But they do, I just put one Osmocote pellet in each of the dying pitchers, depending on the size, and they'll do just fine. If you have a smaller one like this, you can do beta pellets. Same concept, just put it in your pitcher there and it'll do just fine. But again, I purposely sort of am very stingy with the food because they will grow fast for Truncata. And so let's talk about their growth habit and what that means when I say fast for Truncata. So here we're looking at a Titan's Tower from Predatory Plants, and when I say grow fast for Truncata, certainly they are not going to grow at the same rate as sort of a, let's see, a Ventricosa, Sanguinea, or any, basically most hybrids. They are a slower growing plant, but what the reward is, in like this Renoir Tiana is going to grow a lot faster, obviously. But the reward with a Truncata is when they do put out a leaf, if fed properly, that leaf will be almost the size of the entire plant, and we call that a leaf jump. So with this leaf right here, we're talking probably a foot across from corner to corner. And if I was to take this leaf off, it would cover probably 80% of this plant. And so it's got new growth coming out, as you can see. They're not the quickest plant by any means, but they're not as slow, as painfully slow as people like to say that they are. They actually do very well, especially once they get beyond sort of this baby phase. So they will take a little bit of time when they're itty bitty like this. This one's been growing for a while, but as you can see, the media is very dry. See how you can tell the difference? And so that is going to slow it down quite a bit. But overall, they're not that slow growing plants, and that's a good thing and a bad thing. It's a good thing because you get to see these plants grow, but it's it's a bad thing because it can take some time for these to grow, but it's a good thing because these plants, upon full maturity, can get several feet across, and their flower spikes can be several feet tall. So they are not small plants by any means, and so you do need a lot of space. If you grow them in your home, you got to keep that in account because they will get very, very large over time. Now, because they do grow a little bit slower than most plants, it will take time for that to happen, but I digress. Once they get to about medium size, like this one right here, they will start to grow a lot faster as far as their leaf jumps, and especially if you feed them, they will do just fine. Now, about pitchers, one thing to note with these, sometimes they just have they have a mind of their own, and you'll get a really large, like 12, 13 inch pitcher, and then the next one will be, tiny, 6 inches, right? And so a lot of growers think, well, what have I done wrong? Now, certainly humidity is going to play a role in that. How they're fed is going to play a role in that. They're watering. So basically conditions are going to play a role in that. But also understand that the plant is going to produce the pitcher as needed. And so it takes a ton of energy to produce these pitchers. And so if it is well fed, or if it's in a place where it has the nitrogen it needs, it's not going to put all that added energy into producing bigger and bigger and bigger pitchers. And sometimes these plants just have a personality, and so they just don't produce big pitchers every single time. And certainly, depending on the time of the year, the pitcher size will vary as well. So if you get a small pitcher, don't freak out. That doesn't mean that you're doing something wrong. If you've got your light under control, your humidity, aeration to the roots, you will be just fine, and it will be back to producing large pitchers. As promised, we're going to talk through the easier ones to grow. I find are the ones that are hybridized with other truncatas. This one in the back is a Hiroshima clone. There are different clones that you can get, Patian that are clones that do well. But for the most part, my experience, I'm not saying this is everybody's experience, but with my experience, the ones that are hybridized with other truncatas tend to be a lot more forgiving and will do a lot better for you than the pure truncatas like that Hiroshima clone. I will say, in my opinion, Hiroshima is the most difficult to grow. I'm not saying that's the same experience for everybody, but it certainly has been for me. Some really good growing plants is the ones I get from Carnivorous that have JB in it. For some reason, that tends to be a very strong growing hybridizer. And so everyone that I've gotten with that has done it remarkably well. And they're very fast, all things considered, for truncata. So I recommend truncata for all grower levels for a few reasons. One is just how adaptable they are. They do get a lot of bad rap, like I've said in this video, about being or not being a beginner plant, but in my opinion, and growing them, they are in fact a beginner plant, almost bulletproof. They are very tolerant of drier conditions, and so they're going to be a lot more forgiving for new growers who haven't really gotten that humidity level and that water level worked out just yet. They also don't grow super fast, and so that's in a way a very good thing for new growers, because let's face it, most new growers and even intermediate growers don't have the space ready to go, and a lot of y'all want to grow them in your home which is amazing, and that is great. And so what you want is a plant that you can enjoy over time without stressing out about how big they get. Now, again, truncatas get very, very large, and so you want to keep that in mind. It does take quite a while in several years for them to get that way, so you've got plenty of time to get things figured out. But a well taken care of truncata will get very large, up to 4 feet across, and so that is something to note. They don't basal as frequently as other plants, which is sort of a bummer because who doesn't like free plants? But they will eventually basal once they get large enough. And again, they have very long flower stalks, up to 4 feet, and sometimes longer in certain cases. And most carnivorous plants have long flower stalks as a way to keep their pollinators away from their traps. Overall, I could not emphasize enough, or cannot emphasize enough rather, how much fun growing truncatas are. Seeing those enormous leaf jumps, and of course the enormous pitchers, are always fantastic. They are easy to feed with those Osmocote pellets. They do very well as long as you top water on the media and not on the leaves. Try to keep the water off the leaves. It's certainly not going to kill the plant unless it's an extreme case, but it will slow it down, and it just doesn't look great with the edema. I hope that this video has been helpful and has maybe incited in you a desire to grow not only carnivorous plants but truncatas. They are truly, in my opinion, not Raja, but truncata is the king of carnivorous plants, although a lot of people may not agree with that. I absolutely love them. I've got a ton of them, and which I'm eventually going to have to find room for, but I highly recommend that you get them. They can be grown outdoors, they can be grown in grow tents, they can be grown indoors, all of which just requires a little bit of patience to watch them grow, a little bit of time for acclimation, and before you know it, you will have big, beautiful dinner plate size leaves. If you have any questions at all about truncatas or any other carnivorous plants, please don't hesitate to reach out. As always, I hope you have a wonderful day and a wonderful week. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.